Testing. Good morning. Well, we're missing a few folks. I don't know why that would be, since the weather's so fantastic outside. But we're very thankful that you're here, and we've got a few more that are coming in, and we'll give everybody a chance here. I think we're all kind of running different this morning. All right, let's begin class with a prayer. Father in heaven, we are so thankful for your care of each of us. This morning, we're very mindful of central heating in homes and the ability to take care of ourselves in adverse conditions. And we thank you for that blessing as you've given us this wonderful building and place to meet in. And may we especially say thank you for those who take care of this building and keep it so that we can meet here. Father, we thank you for your word. We thank you for the message, the timeless nature of it that we can hold on to in each day of our lives. We thank you most of all for Christ and what he means to each of us in his finished work of redemption and his rule now and in someday in his return. We ask that you would forgive us of our sins, Father. We seek to walk in the light, but we confess those to you. And we recognize that as we walk with you, that we seek each day for a greater holiness. And we desire, most of all, to be like your Son. In Christ's name, amen. Okay, I'm not going to give another handout this morning because we didn't get through the last one. I will go ahead and make a couple of announcements. I guess everybody found them. We ordered a bunch of these Unlocking Revelation books. If you get nothing out of this class at all, except the fact that you ought to read this and keep it and hand it to your friends and order some yourself to give to people when they have questions about Revelation, that will be a win, all right? There is also a book on Daniel by Stafford North. I've mentioned I didn't bring a copy in here. I think my wife recommended it to somebody just a couple of days ago. It is an excellent companion. It's called Daniel, What God Can Do, and I'll help you find that if you would like a copy of that as well. And again, I think last week I mentioned if you want to get a little deeper, there's a member of the church by the name of Homer Haley who wrote an introduction and commentary on Revelation. He goes a little deeper into some things. He takes a historical view just like North does, just like the Bible expects. And he's very reasonable in his interpretation. He goes into a lot more of the Old Testament significance of passages and so forth in a lot more detail than I can in the time that we have in here. And this would definitely be worth your time. You're welcome to look at my copy if you like, or I will help you to order one. And it would really help if I were actually in the book of Revelation right now. So let me get over there, because we're not in Nahum, are we? I want to do just a touch of recap, and then we'll move forward. Remember that chapter 12 begins the second act of the Revelation. It does not move forward in time. For all practical purposes, when we get to the end of chapter 11, the Roman Empire is over. Now, it's not yet, but it's a foregone conclusion at the end of chapter 11. It will be absolutely when we get to the end of chapter 16 in the most literal sense. But chapter 11 finishes out the first act and essentially says, yes, I will destroy Rome, and the reason that I will is because they've decided to defy me and to murder my children. This is God's answer. Chapter 12 gives us a background of why this is happening. In other words, lifts the veil. I always think of that scene in The Wizard of Oz. Remember when they pull the curtain back and there's that guy and he's working all those different mechanisms and so forth, and you get to see behind the curtains. So we're getting a behind-the-scenes look at why is what's happening in this realm happening, in this physical realm. And that's something to think about even today. A lot of what's happening, and we don't always understand that or know, but realize we're being affected by things that we cannot see in the spiritual world. And that's not hocus pocus or some wild fiction. That is very much biblical. And what we find out is that Satan has been trying to destroy the plan and the purpose of God and the people of God from the very beginning. Now, we can think all the way back to Adam and Eve, and we see his desires, and he's described as that serpent of old in the Revelation. This has been his desire all along, to separate you and I, human beings, from God. And he does that in 4 ways. The first way is he seeks to destroy a child at the beginning of chapter 12, and that child is clearly Christ. And he is unable to do that. And as a result of that, he makes a second attack when Jesus ascends. And there is a war in heaven, John tells us. And that is not a figurative thing. There is a war in heaven. Now, what it looks like when angels go to war with one another, I'll bet it's pretty spectacular. But he fails again. And remember, over and over, when you think about Satan, ultimately, the words that you need to think about are failure and loser. He is always a loser. And over again, that's the case. And then he makes a third attack in chapter 12, starting in verse 13, where basically what he's decided is, if I couldn't stop Jesus on earth and I can't stop Jesus in heaven, then I will come to earth and I will just wreak havoc on the plan of God. That's who the woman represents in chapter 12, ultimately. The eternal plan of God to bring about salvation in all the parts of that. So that's what I'm going to do. And God picks up the woman and takes her out into the desert and protects her for this 1,260 or 42 months or 3.5 years for the period of this persecution. In other words, Satan's not going to get to the plan. Satan can't change the plan. Satan can't hurt the plan, because God is protecting the plan, and that plan is the plan of salvation and all that goes with it. And so finally, after the third attack, Satan says, well, I couldn't stop Christ on earth. I can't stop Christ's role of mediation and kingship in heaven over his people. I can't stop the plan. I'll persecute the people. And that is the fourth attack, and that is a huge part of, or really the meat of the book of Revelation. Now, when somebody asks, what's your view of Revelation? And I say it's a historical view, it simply means this: the book itself, if you just allow it to be what it is, you don't mar it, you don't come to it with having read a whole bunch of theological writings by other people or watched a bunch of movies about the end of the world or whatever it is. If you just let it be what it is, it naturally sets itself in the empire of Rome. It's just where it is, and in that time frame. And that happens in chapter 13. Now remember, chapter 13 is not a new chapter. Revelation is one of those books where you really need to just ignore the chapter breaks and just stay with the flow of the story. Verse 17 of chapter 12 says that he went off to make war. That is, the dragon was enraged with the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her children, who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus Christ. So that's one of those marks where we can say, well, we know who those people are. Okay, we know who the dragon is. Satan, because John just comes right out and says the dragon is Satan. And we know who those are that keep the testimony of Jesus Christ and who hold the commandments of God. You know, there's this statement by God over and over, this call, hold the line. You know, hold the line in the book of Revelation. And that is to hold the commandments. And so these are the Christians in this time period. So what is the fourth attack going to look like? Well, in chapter 13, we get introduced to two beasts. There's a first beast, and then there is a second beast that does the bidding of the first beast. And chapter 13 and 1 says that I saw the dragon standing on the sands of the seashore. And I mentioned last week that the idea of the sea is the same really in the minds of ancient people as the abyss. Nothing good came up out of the sea. That's where the sea monsters lived. And you can go back and you can think about some of the things that God says in Job 40 and 41 about, you know, this creature that lives out there and it's unstoppable and so forth. And those creatures really did exist. So when people thought about the sea, it was this terrifying thing that if you got out on it, I don't know if you've ever been out on open water in a vessel and had the waves get about 10 or 12 feet high and start throwing you around like you weigh nothing. That's a pretty terrifying experience. So imagine way back in the ancient world where people didn't really want to get very far from the shore. For one, you might not find the shore again, and two, the storms often took their lives and took their cargo. So the dragon is standing next to a really wicked place in the minds of people. And now he's going to bring up out of that. If you can imagine, we think about movies or whatever. Here he's standing and he's, raising his hands, and this thing is rising up out of the sea. Not literally, but it's coming from the bad place. And so he says, I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 diadems, and on his heads were blasphemous names. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth was like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him power, and his throne, and great authority. I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed, and the whole earth was amazed and followed after the beast. And they worshiped the dragon. Okay, so remember, in the book of Revelation, we usually say that the basic message is we're victorious. Okay, that's true. Those who worship God. Okay, so really when you get down to it, in the book of Revelation, the two words that matter, that need to just be in neon lights up in front of you, is worship God. And then you can put in parentheses under that, no matter what, what are these people doing? What is this beast doing? They worship the dragon. So when we talk about Satanism, when we talk about something that is satanic, the Roman Empire became satanic. Satan offered all the goods that he had. He offered all the power that he had. He offered all the prestige that he could offer. Of course, all this is a lie, but those lies look really good, right? Well, when they're Satan. And he used all the tools that he has to manipulate and to sell delusions. And the people, all the way from the prince down to the lowliest person in the empire, for the most part, they bought into that. They didn't need the God of heaven. We'll take Satan and we'll take his forces and we'll worship him. Now again, I mentioned last week, Daniel 7, and we're not going to go back and read it this morning, but Daniel, back, 600 years before this is written, tells us that there's going to be a kingdom of a lion, there's going to be a kingdom that is a bear, there's going to be a kingdom that's a leopard, and then there's finally going to be a fourth kingdom, and it's going to be made of these first three. So what we know is that the first of those three in Daniel 7 was the Babylonian, the next was the Medo-Persian, the third, that's the leopard, is Greece, and this is clearly Rome. And so when I say we set the revelation down in the time frame of Rome, there's nowhere else to set it if you're just letting the book tell you what it says. That's where you have to be. In modern times, you have people that are coming up with, they're taking all of Revelation and they try to make the whole book somewhere out in the future. So they have to come up with these wild explanations of a new Roman Empire. That somewhere in the future, there's going to be a Roman Empire and we're going to get all these players and all this stuff is going to come up, and it just gets crazy. And the reason it gets crazy is because they don't just let Revelation be Revelation. And they're twisting it and they're turning it, and I don't really know why, if I'm totally honest about that, except to say, remember, one of the attacks of Satan was to make war on the plan of God. And he's still doing that now. So we have a lot of distortion in our world because of that. And once we get to the end of the book, we'll talk more about things that are relevant right now to our very moment of life out of the book. All right, so we know that this is Rome. There's just simply no way that this can be anything else. You can go all the way down to verse 7. It says, it was also given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation was given to him. All who dwell on the earth will worship him. Everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of the life of the Lamb who has been slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is destined for captivity, to captivity he goes. If anyone kills with the sword he must be killed. Here's the perseverance of the saints. There's a lot of question about exactly what verse 10 means, but it means a couple things. That certain things are the way they are. If you do something, there are consequences to your actions. And if you're going to be like Rome, then there's going to be consequences to that. If you're going to remain faithful to Jesus Christ, then your destiny is sealed as well. So the choice is yours. Now, if Satan is going to use the Roman Empire to persecute Christians, he has decided, I can't stop Jesus on earth or in heaven. I can't stop the plan of God. I will go individually after the people of God in the Roman Empire, because if I can stamp the ones out that are already Christians, and if I can make this so miserable that nobody else is going to want to join the Church of Jesus Christ, then I will win. And so that becomes the plan. But how do you do that? All right, well, I raise up this empire. I get a hold of this empire. But now I've got to organize. I've got to become, I don't know another way to say it, a kind of a bureaucrat, if you will. I've got to put on my politician's suit, and I've got to become an organizer. So I need people on the ground, and Satan is choosing human beings that are willing to be in league with him, who will enforce policies that will ensure that Christians are punished. So what happens starts in verse 11, how that's put together. He says, then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. And he had two horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. All right, the idea there in verse 11 is he looks rather innocent. A lamb has a certain innocence about it, right? He may say things that sound pretty good, or he may approach you in a way that seems friendly, but he's actually speaking as a dragon. He exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and he makes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast whose fatal wound was healed. All right? So we learned something about this second beast. He goes about and he makes the earth and and those who dwell on it to worship the first beast. So what do we know? Well, this gets pretty clear to you if you take just a little bit of time to study history. What happened is you had what was called the cult of emperor worship that arose in Rome. And it's very simply this. It was a series of individuals who are hired, just like you got a job and you go to work every day, and whatever it is you do, you work in a sawmill, or you're an accountant, and you've got a job to do. Well, their job was to go from town to town, from village to village, wherever, throughout the empire, and they did two things. First, they engaged in building projects. You can go throughout what used to be the Roman Empire today, if you decide to take a vacation and go and see all of the ruins, and there are temples all over the empire. They started building temples to the emperors. Remember, what's the purpose at this point? By the time Domitian becomes emperor, the official mandate of the Senate of Rome is that he is a god. He's a god. All right, well, what do you do with gods? You worship them. And at this point, it's been put down on paper legally in terms of a law that is what everyone in the empire has to do. All right? Well, now we're going to have to enforce that. So those that were hired on, those that were basically made the government agency of Rome for emperor worship enforcement, if you will, would go out and say, all right, we're going to build a temple in Ephesus, and we're going to build another one in Smyrna, and they just went all around, and we're going to get the architects together, and we're going to put all these places throughout the empire, and the purpose of these places is for you to go in and to worship the emperor. Now, when you do that, and we'll get to that in just a moment. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but we'll read it in just a moment. When you do that, you're going to receive a mark. Now remember, we've already talked about a mark. Remember back in chapter 7? God says, I'm going to mark my people. I'm not going to forget any of you. That's 144,000 who we'll see again before we get done this morning. The Roman government said, we'll give you a mark. Basically, we'll give you the paperwork you need to be able to show someone that you, in fact, have declared the emperor of Rome to be God. Now, if you did that and you went on about your life, nobody cared what else you did. Nobody cared what else you worshiped. Nobody cared how you lived. This was the thing. So as we look at this, what Satan does is he figures out that, or at least he thinks, that the way you're going to destroy Christianity is you're going to put a barrier, you're going to put up a wall, something that is insurmountable, that will ensure their defeat, that they cannot get past. And that's going to be to use the legal system of Rome to ensure that they cannot live, that they can't function, they can't do anything, and that life is absolutely miserable. All right, now not only were these temples put up, but maybe you lived in a little place that wasn't deemed large enough for a temple. Well, they made statues of the emperors. And then they would have groups of men who would carry these statues into little villages, and then they would set them up in the little square in the center of the village, and then they'd go round everybody up in the village, and they'd line everybody up, and they'd say, take some of this incense and burn this before the statue and declare that Caesar is God, at which point everything's fine. We'll give you your mark, we'll give you your paperwork, you can go about and you can live your life, okay? And that's what they did. So basically they blanketed the empire with this demonic worship of a man that was driven by the greed of human beings and the desire of Satan to destroy God's people. This is what happens. If you keep on in chapter 13, let me just read this whole section because it's really important. Starting in verse 11 with this second beast, which is, again, those that enforced emperor worship. It says, then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spoke like a dragon. He exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and he makes the earth and all who dwell in it to worship the first beast whose fatal wound was healed. He performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down out of heaven to the earth in the presence of men. So he performs great signs. There's a lot of power here. This isn't just normal behavior, all right? People are going to be impressed by that. But notice verse 14, what does it says? And he deceives. See, I don't want to be deceived. Those who dwell on the earth because of the signs which it was given him to perform in the presence of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who had the wound of the sword and has come to life. See, that's what I'm talking about, the temples and the statues and all those things. That's the image here that's talked about. And then verse 15 says, and it was given to him to breathe life, or to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast would even speak and cause as many as do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. All right? Folks, this is exactly what happens Exactly what happens. And he causes all the small and the great and the rich and the poor and the free men and the slave to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. And he provides that no one will be able to buy or to sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is the wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. For the number is that of a man, and his number is 666. Now, that's probably the one statement in the book of Revelation that if you meet somebody on the street, they know above all else. I have literally seen someone in front of me I've heard other people have this experience too, be at a cash register, and I was standing there one day and a guy had his total came up $6.66, and he paid the lady like $6.70 because he was afraid of the number. Well, let me talk about this just for a moment. Number one, if you have a study Bible like mine, you'll notice that in the reference, in either the side column or the center reference, it'll say one early manuscript reads 616. That's the best manuscript of Revelation we have. In the best manuscript we have of Revelation, the number of the beast is 616. Now, what do you say about this number? Remember, obviously, numbers in the Revelation are all symbolic. The fact of the matter is we don't know exactly why this number is used. It's just the number that gets used here. It would suggest if the number 7 is perfect, especially if we go with the number 6, and we repeat a number that's not perfect 3 times, it would suggest great imperfection. Massive imperfection, the kind of imperfection that cannot continue on. But don't make any big deal out of it, and don't let anybody else do that. This is one of those points where people just love some flamboyant answer in the book of Revelation when there's not one. This is the number that has been given to Rome, and that's what God did. And apparently, at the beginning of verse 18, he says, here is wisdom. The early recipients of this book knew something that we didn't, and that information we don't have and we don't need. It's a lot like in 2 Thessalonians when we talk about who is the son of perdition that King James speaks about, or later translations say the man of lawlessness, and there's been a debate for 2,000 years about who that is. Nobody knows. We don't know. They knew something that we didn't. So don't let anybody make a big deal out of it. It's not really even relevant or needed to the interpretation of the book. But notice again what this second beast does. He causes all of the poor, the free, the slaves, everybody to worship Rome. And he gives them a mark, and he says that if you have that mark, then you'll be able to buy and sell. So the idea is you've got a business. And Satan thinks, well, here's a great way to attack Christians because I'm really wicked and I'm completely evil and I want to see them have as much pain inflicted on them as possible. I will make it impossible for them to make a living. They won't be able to run their business. They won't be able to go down and get a bank loan. They won't be able to get the supplies that they need to make whatever products that they normally sell. I will get into their life on that level so that they have no income. And if they have no income, they won't have anywhere to live. And if they don't have anywhere to live, then eventually they're just going to die. When you get into the Revelation, you begin to see just when we talk about wickedness and we talk about Satan as wickedness, this is wickedness. This is just pure, undistilled evil on his part. So that's what happens. As far as somebody looking at the physical world and at Rome when all this is going down, these members of the cult of emperor worship, when you think about these kind of people, I'm talking about, I mentioned this last week, like the Stasi in East Germany. And if you don't know who they were, that's probably the most invasive intimidation campaign in modern history. And they just went into people's homes and they did whatever they wanted. They took your clothes to make sure their dogs knew what they smelled like in case you ran off. Everybody remembers when the Berlin Wall fell. That's what we're talking about here. A Stasi-type movement, or I think I said last week as well, these are just jack-booted thugs. But a lot of them we would call well-heeled thugs. They're the kind that wear nice suits, and they smile, and they've got their hair combed real nice, and maybe they're wearing a ring or two. Those kind exist as well. And together, they launch and execute a program of execution. And they kill Christians by the thousands. We don't know how many, actually. The records don't tell us. Some historians put it into the millions, but it would have certainly reached probably into the tens of thousands, if not the hundreds of thousands. And this is just a campaign of slaughter. It's really brutal and awful to think about. And you can go back. We have records. We definitely know what happened. How many, we don't know. But the things that were done to Christians is unspeakable. And to look at this and to see it, one would say, well, this is done. This is over. There is no way that any movement can survive this kind of devastation. Okay? Because that is what happened. But then you look at the beginning of chapter 14, and this is what those early Christians needed to see, and it's what you and I need to see as well. Again, we're not starting a new section here. We're still following. So Rome is running over the Christian community like a steamroller. Okay? Satan is running over the Christian community with the use of Rome like a steamroller. And then John says, and that's a big then in this book. I looked, and behold, the Lamb. All right, so we had one that looked like a lamb, that acted like a lamb, but now we've got the Lamb. Okay? There's authenticity here. Was standing on Mount Zion. Mount Zion is always seen in Scripture as a place of triumph. To stand upon the mountain was to triumph over all. It was to be victorious. And there's some people with him. And who's with him? That's right. And I saw the 144,000. Okay? Now, where do we see them first? Way back in chapter 7, right? And remember, the question had been asked, when, O Lord, will you avenge our deaths? When will you wreak your vengeance upon Rome? And God said, take a white robe and wait. It's coming. But first, there's some things that have got to happen. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the 144,000. And that number represented every faithful Christian then living. It's not a literal number. It is a number to say this is going to be a complete marking, a complete care. Nobody's going to be forgotten. God is paying attention. God knows this will be a John 10 statement. The shepherd know the sheep, and the sheep know the shepherd kind of idea here. Okay? But what's important to note at this point in the Revelation is in chapter 7, where were the 144,000? Literally, where were they? They're in chapter 7. Where are they? They're on earth. Okay? And where are they at the beginning of chapter 14? Heaven. Okay? See? Satan's not winning. What Satan's actually doing is he's building the kingdom of God. And this is one of those moments when you need to really realize that how powerful your faith is, and also couple that with the realization that God doesn't do anything the way you and I think he ought to. I promise you that. And so he asks us to be faithful and to hold on and not to worship the beast. Not to worship this world, but worship me. And where will you end up? With the Lamb. And you also, and I also, we are a part of that 144,000. We're talking about, in the context of the book, those that were persecuted and remained faithful, but we're also talking for all time about those that are faithful throughout the ages. Now, where am I? Verse 2 says, "And I heard a voice from heaven like the sound of many waters, like the sound of a thunder, and the voice which I heard was the sound of the harpist playing on the harps. And they sang a new song before the throne and before the living creatures and the elders, and no one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been purchased from the earth." Now, there's just a note here that I want to make. This is the idea that's being put across here is now they are the elite. Now they are the most special people in the world. Now they are the most powerful individuals. Now, I mean, obviously not as powerful as God and so forth, but they have come to power. Because why? Why is that? Because they can sing a song nobody else can sing. In other words, they see and they can do and they understand in a way that nobody else can. They've been given, for a lack of a better way of saying it, the secret knowledge. Everything's been revealed to them. And so now there is this song, and they can understand it and they can sing it. But only the ones who had God's mark upon them can do that. They're the only ones that get to be in what is now the members-only club, the elite. And if you stop and think about this in the context of the letter, none of these people felt like that in this life. I mean, do you feel like that you get to be a part of the ruling class in this world? Do you really, or do you feel much more like you are constantly handed down the rulings of other people that you don't really have much to do with, and then you just have to deal with it, right? That's generally how we feel. Well, guess what? That goes away, because now you sit in a seat of authority. You sit in glory. You sit in power. And that's the message that's coming across here. Satan said, I'm just going to go through the empire and I'm going to stomp a mud hole in Christians and in Christianity. I'm just going to stomp it into the ground. But in doing so, what he actually did was he made those people unfathomably powerful and, interestingly enough, more powerful than he is. So think about that when you think about your life and think about what's coming for you and why you should hold on to Christianity. Again, in the Revelation, the idea is just hold on to it. So much of the New Testament, actually, and even the Old Testament, is just hold on to your faith. Hold on to it no matter what happens or what you don't understand, and especially when you don't understand, just whatever you do, don't turn loose of your faith in God. There's plenty of times in life when we don't know why we ought to keep believing, or when we do not understand. And God says, keep on. Just stay with me. And in the end, you're going to sing that new song. You're going to get to be a part of the members-only club in heaven. And those members are those that are washed in the blood of the Lamb and who have the seal of God on them. So that's a really awesome thought. And it's a really awesome thought if you are living under a government who is actively seeking to kill you, which is what these people were. Now, let's see, we got about 5 minutes, and we may just go ahead and stop right there. Let me see here. Yeah, I'm just going to stop right there. Anybody want to ask a question or make a comment? And then we'll pick up there next week.
Well, in our songbook, it is the new song.
Yeah.
In our songbook.
Yeah.
We don't sing it because it's got a tenor lead down there in the chorus. We don't have tenors.
Yeah. But, all right, anybody else?
I got a comment.
Go ahead, sir.
I think Satan is following God's plan. how many beasts are
There's two beasts in,
there? Two beasts
yeah.
and one dragon, or?
Well, Satan is the dragon, yeah.
Yeah, so dragon would be like God, and one of the beasts would be like Christ, and the other one could be the church or salvation.
You mean, when you think about Satan, in the attacks, in his action, when he's destroyed something, it's been defeated, and yet you see again and again, for example, with the death of Jesus, that was, as far as he was concerned, that was the end, but it isn't.
No, and God's plan of salvation is perfect.
Yeah.
And Satan wanted his to be.
And the plan of salvation was that Jesus would die. But Satan didn't understand that, apparently. If he had wanted to stop it in that sense, the thing to do would have been to convince Jesus to live. So, lots to think about. God is certainly in control, and Satan is a tool in the hand of God. I don't understand that, I'll be completely honest, but that is true. Yes, Bert?
This fighting in heaven, it talks about that in Zechariah, it talks about it in Ezekiel.
It talks about it in Daniel, too.
Is there, well, there's a lot of places it talks about it.
Yeah.
Does that still go on?
I would
In
have...
Jude, it talks about Michael contending with the devil over Moses' body.
We'll talk about Satan being chained in a little bit in the Revelation. I don't know, Bert, exactly how to answer that. I know. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Satan's going to fight till he finally is, till he can't fight no more, till God ends it. So.
Did Nebuchadnezzar set up a gold
Yep.
idol?
That's right.
In his own image, and told everybody that was God and he had to worship it.
And that's why you say history is a circle. What happened in Daniel is what happened in Revelation, and it'll happen again. If you live long enough, you'll see it and you'll live through it. Again, the call is just to remain faithful. And remember where the 144,000 ended up. Those are the most powerful people in existence right now. And you can be one too.
Well, I may be short-sighted, but I see our nation is similar. We have something bad happen, North Carolina, the floods or whatever, and now these fires. Who is the main people that runs in and rescues everybody and takes care of us? Our government.
Yeah.
And we fall in line with whatever they want or whatever they, and I can see a lot of it, don't let the people take care of themselves, the government wants to be the one that takes care of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easy to see parallels. It's hard in your own time. See, I've got a book by Victor Davis Hanson called The Second World Wars. And if you want to read about them, it's comprehensive. But he says in the beginning of it, he says, we're 80 years away, now we can look at it clearly. And the point he's making is it's very difficult in your own time and in your own moment to see what's happening. So I don't make a lot of claims about this very moment, but you are correct in that is what happens throughout time. And people depend too much on a physical government and they stop depending on God, and Satan steps in. Absolutely. All right, thanks for being here.